6, 2009. Today we're interviewing Mr. Fritz Kuebel. The videographer are Barney Klein and Jean Guthrie, and the interviewer is Linda Howard. Hello Fritz, how are you today?
Fine.
Okay Fritz, would you please give us your full name?
My name is Fritz Joseph Kuebel Jr.
Okay, do you have a nickname?
Everybody always called me Junior, especially when I went to grammar school. Most of my kinfolks did. When I went to high school in Blanco, everybody started calling me Fritz, because that's the way I signed my name. And I was born January the 9th, 1934. And we lived here, but I was born in Fredericksburg. And we lived in an old frame house. And in 1936, my dad decided to build a rock house. He quarried all the rock out of the river on our property and hauled it with a team of horses and a wagon. And he also said that he didn't know how many loads he hauled, but he hauled 1,000. And then I know the men that built the house, the rock masons, was Mr. Abel Klein from Stonewall and his son Lawrence Klein. And they done the rock work and building. And then, I'm trying to think. And,
what kind of tools did they use to quarry those rocks?
Yeah, I don't know. We had a Mexican family lived on the place. I'm sure they helped my dad with it. But they didn't have jackhammers or anything. They had to do it with, I guess, with chisel and hammers or sledgehammers. And it was all natural rock off the place. Even some that were found different places, maybe something the Indians had, you know, like these grinder deals, these round rocks they ground stuff with. They were placed in there in different places. And then it stayed that way until Mr. Stanley Williamson bought the place back in about 1968, I think. And then they put fake stucco around it. That's right. We were actually about 12 miles from Blanco with the old dirt road there. And now there's a road straight out. Now it's only about 10, I guess about 10 miles. And on the farm, my dad used to team his horses. And I remember the horses' names were Dick and Doc. He'd come on, giddy up, Doc. And he plowed it. It had way over 100 acres in cultivation. And it took quite a while to plow that.
What kind of plow did they have?
In those days, they just had these old turning plows behind the two horses. And
what was a turning plow? Can you describe it?
I don't remember that well. But in 1940, my dad bought a John Deere Model B tractor. And I spent many hours on it. They call him a popping Johnny. It has 2 cylinders and it goes pop, 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 pop. And you sit on that thing almost all day long. You go home at night and you go to bed, you can hear that popping in your ears sometimes. And I've heard other people say that too. But anyhow, then we ended up with a triple disc plow that we plowed with, and we had a spring tooth harrow we'd harrow with before we plant the grain or the hay. And you could plow all day long. The triple disc plow probably plowed about 3 foot. Nowadays they go in there with these big tractors and big plows and they plow it in the whole field in one day. But that's the way it was back then. And he used the horses and wagons for everything, made hay. They had what they call a row binders. They put it in bundles and stacked it. They didn't have balers. And anyhow, what we used to do in the summertime, we'd go to work. My dad always got up real early before daylight, milked the cow and everything, and then we would go ahead and always take a little nap after dinner. I think a lot of the German people did that. They'd lay down maybe about an hour or so, and then go and went back to the field. That was the hottest part of the day when you went back in. And but my dad, he raised corn and oats and wheat, and in the summertime we'd plant Hygeria or Sudan, and we made our own hay. But he had to buy protein feed. They call it cottonseed cake. Now they make it in pellets, cottonseed, and it's high protein, about 40% protein. and they would feed that in the wintertime to our cattle and stuff. And we raised sheep and goats, commercial goats and commercial sheep. Later on, I went into the registered outdoor business years later. But I think I started school here in 1941, and I remember real well the time we were visiting some neighbors, the Weiss and the Becks, back off that Weiss Trainer Road. And we were visiting them, and that's when we found out it was December the 7th, 1941. And I remember they said that the Jacks had attacked Pearl Harbor, and I remember that real well, you know.
Did you hear it on
when
the
we were
radio?
driving back, they had it on the radio, heard it on the radio, I guess. And anyhow, I remember that. It's always stuck in my mind that day.
What were you thinking that day?
Well, I didn't really know, you know, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and I knew that before then they said, well, we had sent all our scrap metal, everything, Japan had bought it from us, and they were using it to build up their, you know, their army and their ships and everything. So then.
Did it scare you a little bit when you heard something like that?
Well, I was too young to really realize what was happening, you know, at the whole World War. But then during the wartime, I know when I went to school here at Lindendale, and I had a good friend of mine, Claude Cage Atkins, who at that time lived over here. He was the adopted son of Charlie and Lee Whitworth. Actually, he was their nephew. His mother had died of cancer, his dad got killed in a car wreck, and they adopted him when he was real small. They never had any children. But we were real good friends. And at that time, all the training planes were flying over all the time. And we got to where he and I would always draw, you know, pictures of planes. And if a plane come over real low, we'd jump up and run outside. And your teacher didn't mind, but see them go by. And anyhow, I was kind of intrigued by flying then. Of course, I never got, my uncle had a plane in San Antonio, and he flew us a little bit, but I never did really. I never got him to fly. But Claude Atkins, he ended up going into well, he went to medical school. I think he graduated from Baylor Medical School in Houston. There was a medical schools down there. And he went into the service, and he ended up being commander of the Charleston, Carolina hospital base. And he'd come back here. Actually, I leased land from him where his folks used to live, the Whitworths down there, and that's where we moved to. And I leased his property until he sold it several years ago. And then, of course, he's passed away since then. But
yes.
He was a brilliant, and he graduated from high school. I don't know how old he was, about 16, and he went through college, and he was brilliant, but he also had common sense.
Well, that's
So many of the brilliant people.
That's good.
And he was raised out here on the ranch, you know. So he always said he didn't care much for the work, that farming and ranch work.
Well, did you like farming and ranching work?
Well, what I liked best was the ranching, was the livestock. I got tired of sitting on that tractor all the time, you know. And my dad, in 1949, we were dynamiting a post hole for a corral we were building. It was solid rock, and we were using dynamite. And we put a half a stick of dynamite. We'd drill out a hole in the rock with a crowbar, and he'd put half a stick of dynamite in and have a fuse and light it. And we'd walk back behind another barn, and when it blasted, you'd go ahead and break it up, and then you could make a hole, put a post in.
Right.
Well, we let one of them went back, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And he finally said, well, I guess the fuse went out. I said, no, Dad. I said, no, that fuse went out. And when he walked up to the hole, he had a straw hat on, and when he got right up to it, it went off. And it hit it, knocked his straw hat probably 20 feet up in the air, and hit him right in the face. He lost one eye right there. But they done surgery and everything, and he never could see good, but he got where he could see enough to get around. Yeah. Eventually he went completely blind.
Yeah.
But
did you have to take over for him after that?
yeah, I pretty much had it. I was 14. Yeah, when I was going to be a junior in high school. Of course, Billy Page lived up the road now. We were both going to play football. But when that happened, you know, there's no way that I could. So I didn't play football until I was a senior.
Yeah, you had to take over the work of the farm?
Yeah, well, had a milk cow every morning, and I had a little bit of everything, but it went right along with it. My mother and my sister, you know. I was in the hospital quite a while. I mean, he got come home, he couldn't hardly do anything, but at least he could get around, see, you know, nothing. I could see the door and stuff like that. When I was in the service in 57 and 58, he went completely blind during that time. Mm-hmm. So I went from here. We went to a country school. I went here at Lindendale, and all the little other country schools around. Somewhere in the high school and the big schools, they changed from 11 to 12 grades. They used to be 11 grades. So when we got to go to high school, we got to skip a grade. We went through the 8th grade here.
At Lindendale?
Through the 7th grade, and we went to Blanco. We were in freshmen, we were in 9th grade. Okay. Because somehow years before they had gone from 11 to 12 grades, and the little schools didn't do that. I know schools that like here, and I guess all others around, I know twin sisters in different places, the kids did the same thing, got to skip a grade.
Right. Do you remember any of your teachers?
Yes, my first grade teacher here at Lindendale was Miss Elsie Lindy. And she was from over around Stonewall High, somewhere over there. And she was my first grade teacher. At that time, the teachers boarded with people that lived around here. They stayed with them. She stayed with Mr. and Mrs. Alfred Wilkie, the mother of Mary Ann Singleton now. She'll be here. She lives right down here. And then the picture I had there was Miss Evelyn Fudge. I think we must have had her in 2nd and 3rd grade. And her brother, Henry Fudge, is still living down here.
This is the picture you're talking about?
Yeah, that's her, Evelyn Fudge.
Okay.
And I don't know, she might have taught here 2 years. Now, we had a teacher in between there after her that I can't remember her name. But later on, Mrs. Bill Hale, who lived right down here, the Hales owned this property around here. She started teaching us, and I think she taught until I went to Blanco. And I was just trying to think, when I went to Blanco.
Do you remember any of those teachers in Blanco?
Yeah, we had our teachers. I know our biology teacher was Ms. Eva Caddick, and her sister, let's see, she taught also. She was Mrs. Marie Carroll, and Mr. Ned Helms was our superintendent the whole time I was in school. And Mr. George Abernathy was our English teacher. And then we had Mr. Bob Dedeke was our algebra teacher. And Mrs. Rollins, she taught, I'm trying to think, geometry, I think. And then we never had an agriculture teacher until I was a junior, and we got Mr. Lonnie Beck. We had an agriculture teacher. We took vocational ag just 2 years. And
was your vocational ag good for you as a farmer?
Oh yeah, I love vocational ag. And like I said, I always liked the ranching, working with the livestock better than I did the farming part. But yeah, so he.
Is there something special about animals to you?
I don't know. It seemed like I always liked them. We had registered shorthorn cattle. My dad did, and I had some too. And well, that was a lot later. That was in '59. We had a great big flood one night. It rained about 12 inches up the river. It didn't rain about 1.5 inches in Blanco, but we had a big flood, and it caught our cattle. The river got so big, it backed them up against the field fence, and they couldn't go any further, and they swam across the river. Well, the next morning, there was a cow over there just bawling across the river on my uncle's place, and went over there, and she was the calf was bawling, and his mother was missing, and we never found that cow, but that's the only cow we lost. We had about 15 head, and she was one that belonged to me.
Right.
So a calf made it, but we always wondered if maybe she was trying to cross that flood and maybe a log or something hit her They usually say they will come out down the river, maybe, you know, it might be miles where they'll get out. But we never found her, so I don't know. I figured maybe she got covered up in a gravel bar or something. 'Cause different people lost everything. I know Mr. Henry McLean, his baler washed off down the river. And he collected insurance on it, and later on somebody said they saw a piece of it sticking out of a gravel bar down below Frugal's. But he didn't want anybody to know.
Well, we won't tell anybody then. Is that all right?
Okay, so actually, I
was going to ask you another question a while ago. You were talking about schools and stuff. Have the schools really changed since when you went to school? Are they different?
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you the difference is in, like here we were at, okay, we had 7 grades in this one room here. And my class was the biggest at one time. We had 4 in my class. Now, there might have not been anybody in the first grade, and might have been 1 or 2 in the second, and I mean, we all had it, and you had one teacher. And actually it helped you because you got to hear stuff when she's teaching the grades ahead of you that you know, so no, the little country school was the best place to get an education, I think. Now there's no discipline in the schools. There was discipline then, boy, I tell you. If I done something wrong, you got paddled. And I mean, and it should still be that way. Of course, we can't think the way things are now. But,
did you ever get a paddle?
I don't think I ever did. I got in trouble one time because the boy said I called him a dirty name, and I did not. But he said I did, so I got, we had to come in here together, and the teacher, she chewed us out pretty good now, me, and I told him later on, I don't know why you said that. I said, I never called you that.
That sounded kind of familiar. That's why I asked that question.
But anyhow, everything went pretty good. And I was like I tell you, coming to school here at Lindale, I guess the first year maybe my dad drove me up here. But then after that, Chester Weber, who lived about 2 miles further down than me, he was 2 grades ahead of me, we started riding horseback. He'd come with his horse, and I get on my, we'd ride to school here. And we'd tie our horses right down here in the little live oak trees, and just take the cinch loose on. We wouldn't hardly unsaddle them. And in the evening, boy, when you cinch that saddle up, those horses were ready to go. They knew where to go. They wanted to go home. They've been tied all day up here.
Well, did they have something to eat while they were tied?
Well, we did. We fed them in the morning and fed them when we took them back. But we didn't feed them down here. And they stood there in the shade. And I mentioned it before one time with some of them. I don't know if it's spring or fall, but you know, we didn't get much weather reports at all. And it was a warm day, and I always went barefooted.
I noticed that in this picture.
When we came down here, that day, a norther blowed in, and it started snowing that evening. And I mean, my feet was getting so cold that we bring our lunches, everybody brought their lunches, and had brown paper bags, and I tied one on each foot and rode home because it was cold. Chester Weber reminded me about that years ago. I forgot all about it. He said, remember that time when you tied those lunch bags on your feet? I said, yeah, I did.
Oh,
so that was one of the things that...
Just looking at that.
Okay. That really,
that heater.
I remind that later on. And Chester and I, we lived some of the furthest, but when we got here in the morning, we all got to build a fire because the other kids lived down here 200 yards. And they would not come in till after the bell rang. The teacher had a bell. She'd ring the bell, you know, and kids are out here playing that. So the closest kids, they wouldn't come till you rang the bell. And then the Page kids lived up the river up there pretty good. They were probably as far as we were to come to school. And later on, there was a family, the Everetts, a lot of those kids, there were about 4 of them on that picture. They moved up here and lived right at the foot of the divide next to where the Rhodes house is.
Well, how did you get the wood for that? Did you have to chop it?
No, the wood was out here. I think always some of the parents cut the broadwood, you know, had stacked out here. We just go get it. We didn't know. We didn't have to. And because everybody used wood stoves and everybody would saw a bunch of wood every year, you know, before the winter. And we built a fire. And I guess it's the same stove. I don't really remember that it is. But it would heat this whole little, room in here. Oh, and something else about, I won't mention her name, but the neighbor kids that were always late, you could be sitting at your desk, and when that back door opened and the stove was pretty warm, you could smell garlic. You didn't have to look who was coming in, you could smell garlic. And I think in those days, they even, some of them said they ate a lot of garlic, but they even wore it around their neck to keep from getting cold and stuff.
Oh,
But
okay.
you could, when they
Well,
walked in,
I've heard of that before.
Yeah.
Garlic.
anyhow, you could tell when they came. And, no, a little school like this, I don't know how many were in attendance here at one time the most, but never too many. Like I said, 4 was our class, about the biggest. And then we had kids move in, from other places, be one maybe, Jesse Rose up here, he came later on. I guess in the first few grades, I think they came from Sabine. And then we had a boy named Jimmy Howard. His dad took care of the place up here at the head of the Blanco River. Dr. Schattenberg from San Antonio owned it, and Mr. Howard and Jimmy lived on it. And this doctor would come up all the time. He had a bunch of sheep, and he'd bleed the sheep and use the blood in some kind of experiments. About once a month, he'd come bleed those sheep.
Oh,
And
you don't know what kind of experiment?
I don't know what they used the blood for something. They did something with it.
I was going to ask you, what kind of games did you play, here at school?
Yeah.
Did you have recesses?
Yeah, oh yeah, we had a recess and we had an hour off for lunch. And we used to play baseball right out here. We had a little backstop. And I know the Page kids, they moved from down here. Well, I went to school, they moved from up here at Cane City, a little place right before you get into Fredericksburg off the left. A railroad track used to go through there. And they had big stores there and everything years ago. Well, they came from Cane City, and I know when there was 3 girls and 1 boy. And when they were batting, they called them Cane City Woodchoppers. Kind of batting down.
Well, what was your group called?
No, I don't know. We were just, everybody from around here, grown up here. And,
You didn't give them a name?
And like I said, we played this Andy Over game. We had a rubber ball, and I don't know how we chose that side to go up. Somebody, on one side of the building, north side, somebody on the south. And holler Andy, and you'd holler over, and they'd throw the ball up there where it just barely go over the top and roll down. Whoever caught it would try to take off, go around, and hit one of the others, and then that one had to throw it over.
Were you pretty good at that?
Yeah, well, I think we were. And we played hide and seek when we were little, real little. Usually that tree up there was where they had, where they had hide. When they
Describe hide and seek. Some people might not understand
Well,
what hide and seek is.
Somebody would go up there and close their eyes, and the other people went and hid, and then they would try to go find them. And I remember, if they didn't find you, you could run in and tag the tree, the base, and you. But otherwise, if they caught you and then you had to hide your eyes, and the others would hide. And it was, and this old live oak tree right out here, everybody used to, like I said, almost everybody went barefooted, except in the wintertime. And we'd you go back here and you kind of run and put the foot up in that fork, and go up and just go around up through here, and there was a low limb, and they'd swing down just like a bunch of monkeys, one following the other. And that's a wonder somebody didn't ever break an ankle or something coming down. But
That's the one with the fork out there?
yeah, that big that tree there. You get up on it, and then it come up this limb on the southwest side, and then there's a smaller limb you can grab in your hands and swing down and drop down. And otherwise, that's about all the games I guess we played here at school.
Well, when you got through with school and you got home, what did you have to do then?
We didn't have our chores to do. My dad raised a lot of hogs, and used to have to feed the hogs in the evenings and different things. And of course, my dad done most of the stuff, but we all me and my sister both had our chores all the time to do when we got home.
You mentioned hogs. Did you ever have a session where you butchered hogs?
Oh yeah, I forgot to tell about that.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Every winter, my dad would butcher a beef. It wasn't over Sears, I don't know, but it was a good sized animal. And he'd butcher a hog. And then of course, they'd scald the hog and we'd scrape it. You know, they didn't skin them, we'd scrape them. Scraped all the hair off of them. And then they made sausage. And my dad was not a deer hunter. My uncle, Emil Kuebel, was a big hunter. But my dad didn't deer hunt, so he always butchered a beef and a hog. And nowadays we make it out of deer, and we still do make it out of deer and pork. But then he would go ahead and cure the hams and the bacon and all that in the smokehouse. I don't even do it. I wouldn't really know how to do it anymore now. But
did they ever make lye soap out of part of that hog?
Make what?
In your family, did they ever make lye soap out of part of that hog?
Oh yeah, my mother always cooked lye soap. She had a big old black pot out there. I think she always washed on Mondays. Daddy they had 2 pots there. He'd build a big fire on it, you know, get it to boiling. And they made a little lye soap, and she used the lye soap, you know, for the washing and everything. And of course, she got a rear washing machine then that, you know, you could wash it in it and right through the wringer, you know, and hang it on the clothesline. And she also used to make, the Germans called it Kupkäse, cooked cheese on it. I don't know, you take, how she did it, but she took the milk and made cheese out of it, and it was crumbly kind of, and she put it in a cloth sack and hang it on the clothesline for it to cure, and when it got to a certain point, she'd take it, and they put butter with it, but they'd made sort of a cream cheese out of it, and it was always really good. And my daughter even makes some now, and tries to make some, not the way they did, but you know,
Well, if she did that, then she also made homemade butter out of it.
oh yeah, we had our own butter and cream, you know, she skimmed all the milk, and we had cream, you know, and then we had chicken, we had our own eggs, we had our own meat, and then she baked bread, you know, by flour, she baked homemade bread, and she cooked in the wood cook stove. All those years until we got electricity. I don't know when we got electricity. It must have been in the late 40s. And all this road it's a dirt road. And it rained a lot in those days. It didn't get muddy. I'm a Chestnut be riding horseback. And it'd get muddy, and usually the ditches were running water. From my house all downhill, you know, it'd be running water. And I know where we live, people get stuck on the hill, and my dad had a John Deere 1940 Model B tractor. He'd go down and pull them out, you know, where they could go on. Because he got ruts in the road, you know.
Right.
And they had an old, little bitty, it was like a Caterpillar, and they had an old road grader that they pulled with it. And I know Mr. Ernest Page was doing the road work, and different people around here were school trustees. My dad was, different ones, you know, different times.
Right.
And then, of course, we're in Kendall County over here, right in the corner of Kendall County. And everything, it's called jury duty, everything we were at Bernie, had to go to Bernie. And also, we hardly ever saw anybody from over there, officials, until before election. They'd come out here electioneering, want our vote, you know. But the rest of the year we didn't hardly ever see it.
Did you get your road fixed then when they come out electioneering?
Do what?
Did you get your road fixed then when they came
No, they promised stuff. But our commissioners, I don't think we ever had one live here. Usually the commissioner for this district lived around Canadian. I know Mr. William Road and different ones that were commissioners. I don't think we ever had anything happen here. I think in 1951 we finally got a paved road. I don't remember how far it went. But I know before that these roads were so dusty in the summertime your car would get, upholstery and everything would get dust in them, you know.
You said you had a car. When did you get your first car?
Well, my folks had a car. I mean, I never had a car until after I was in high school. But I could drive my folks' car.
What kind of car did your folks have?
I don't know what the first ones were, that was a long time ago, but I know we had a Chevrolet, 1951 Chevrolet that Dad bought after I graduated, and I could use it. But otherwise, you know, I guess that's when I graduated high school in 51. And that's also, we had that, well, it's called a 6-year drought. I graduated in 51. We had a flood in September of 52. It rained around 20 inches. And after that, we didn't hardly get any rain, a little rain off and on, until 1957, when I got married and moved to Fredericksburg. That's when it started raining that spring. And we'd have big hailstorms and rain. One of the biggest hailstorms, I think, was in 1946. And you could go up there and all the old roofs and that were just dented in real bad. Some of them might still be, most of them were replaced. But they were big as baseballs when they first started, and big as softballs, and then they got about like baseballs and they covered the ground about a foot.
Oh, wow.
And
That was big.
Oh, it killed livestock, and I don't know what else. I heard it even killed a horse or two. But we didn't have that bad hail down here. I think we had a little bit that time. But I know we went to Fredericksburg, and boy, everything was tore up there.
Well, I'm sure back when you were a boy, you went to town every day, right? Into Blanco?
We went to Blanco every Saturday. We'd go into town, buy the groceries. Daddy would sit out, there used to be trees on this west side. Big hackberry tree, and we had benches there. He'd sit there and talk, or maybe go in the beer joint and drink a beer. On the west side here where Mrs. The lady that bought the whole west side square.
Oh, Renee Benson.
Renee Benson. Yeah, there were some big hackberry trees, shady trees, right along the edge of the road there. And go get our groceries. And on Sunday morning, we went to church. We were Catholic, and at that time, we'd either go to Fredericksburg, where my mother was raised, or they have a little chapel down here at Twin Sisters, on the little road that goes from Twin Sisters over to the
St. Mary's?
They called it St. Mary's.
Yeah.
It was a lot smaller than this, I think. And they still, I think, let's see, All Souls Day or something, they still have services down there. Right. But then our church was built, I think, in 1942. And the same men that built my dad's house, they done the rock works on the Catholic Church, Emil Klein and his son Lawrence.
That's St. Ferdinand's, right?
Yeah, St. Ferdinand's Church. And they were real good rock masons. I mean, they were considered, I guess, about the best. And
that's when you started going to the Catholic Church in Blanco then?
Yeah, we either had to go to Fredericksburg, Twin Sisters, and we started going to Blanco.
Were your family pretty close?
Oh yes, we were real close. And like I said, we stayed on the farm, you know. My mother had all she could do, you know, washing and cooking and all everything. And my dad was stayed busy all the time. And then we helped, the kids helped. And,
did you have meals together? And
yeah. Well, I've got a picture, I don't think it's in here, where my sister and I, when we were real small, we milked our shorthorn cow. We didn't have a Jersey cow. But I've got a picture where I'm sitting on one side and she's on the other stool. We're both milking the same cow. And Perry made a big picture of it, painted off of that. I think it was lead. But boy, it was a good one. She was going to try to enter in the contest and everything. She made a big picture, even framed it. But that little picture, I don't think it's on that board. There's all these other pictures. Somehow it got left off.
Well, since you basically told us that you produced all your own food, what were your favorite foods during that time when you were growing up?
I don't know. Mostly it was beef, potatoes, and gravy. And that's what I still like that.
No brown beans or anything?
Oh, some, but she wasn't. And one thing, mother ever cooked any Mexican food like enchiladas. We had chili, but of course she was German and raised German, and my grandparents lived in Fredericksburg. So, yeah.
What was your grandmother's maiden name? Do you know?
Knopp, K-N-O-P-P. My mother's name was Estella. Knopp.
Okay.
And she married Stella Knopp Kuebel. And my dad, my grandfather, was born in 1850 down at on the Guadalupe Spring Branch where my great-grandfather settled. And he moved up here and settled, and my uncle got part of the place, and Dad ended up as part of the place.
Going back to Blanco, was Saturday activities include the movie?
Yes, we went to the movie, my sister and I did, for 10 cents. And I don't know, maybe we got a bag of popcorn for a nickel, I don't remember. But we did. We'd go to the movies, my mother did the shopping, Dad would visit with the old guys on the
That was something that all the kids did? That was
pretty much our entertainment. Sometimes, like on a Sunday or something, maybe Sunday or night, my mother would take me and my sister to it. It was a good movie or something. Take us down and we'd go to a movie, but mostly it was Saturday evenings. And that's when all the people came to town, on Saturdays.
And shifting gears and fast forwarding, Fritz, I'm almost sure once you told me a little bit about the Jimmy Stewart story.
Oh yeah,
that's a great local story.
Yeah. Well, that's when I was in high school. This was a Franklin ranch. At one time, it was close to 10,000 acres. Now, the Franklins were from England that owned it, and Mr. Ed Hyatt was a ranch foreman. He lived on a rock house up above my uncle, my Emil Kuebel's. And it's on that Manius Road now, they call it. It's right up there about a mile. And he was foreman on it. And his children, before I ever went to school, they had a buggy. I think they called it a hack. And they would come through our pasture and come up to a gate right by our garage and come up here and go to school. And one of his daughters, her name was Annie D. Hyatt, she married Ralph Ebling from Round Mountain. Well, when we had a meeting up here several years ago, a historical deal, and she was here at that meeting. And she said one thing about it, said that old, her dad bought her that old hack. There was about 2 or 3 boys and several girls. They weren't all going to school at the same time, but anyhow, they drive that thing. And their dad always said, well, they don't look much, but it's paid for. I think he put a sign on the back. They don't look like much, but it's paid for. And anyhow, they came up here. And then at Franklin Ranch, I'm sure I think Jimmy Stewart, the movie actor, was the first one to buy it. He had ranches up in North Dakota too, and he bought this ranch, and there was Cecil Childers from Abilene was kind of in charge, you know. Jimmy Stewart would come down maybe once or twice a year, and then Cecil Childers from Abilene, somehow he was in charge, and they raised polo ponies. And then Milton Jones, that was raised down here where we live in our house, he got out of the service, so he became the ranch manager, and he took care of it. And he was quite a character. I had one of his nephews used to work for him. He was the boy was okay, but he stuttered a little bit. So anyhow, Hogg hired him to help. And he said, you know, I slept upstairs, and they had TVs already downstairs. He said, they get that TV going all night long. I was trying to sleep. And in the morning, get me up, and I'd go out there, and we'd load a flatbed truck with sacks of feed, and I'd go out and start feeding. Said Hogg would put his boots on, he always wore his boots over, tall boots over his pants, and his spurs, and he'd go to town and walk around the block and go drink coffee. And the boy had to do all the work. He finally quit. But he used to tell that. He said, I always thought that was pretty good. The manager would go to town, put his boots and spurs on, and walk around the square, go drink coffee, and he'd be out there feeding on the south side and then on the north side of the road here.
I thought I heard some story about Jimmy Stewart winning the ranch in a card game or something.
I don't know how he acquired it. He had it. But now someone told me that at one time, Edward Siegel told me, somebody told him that he lived in our rock house. I said, oh no, he didn't live there. He just came down then. But I said, but somebody had told him, Edward said, that's not right. He said, somebody was talking about the history and that he had lived in that rock house my dad built. I said, oh, no. We joined him all around. Yeah. And then, well, when the Franklins had it, before Jimmy Stewart, Adolph Steeler from Comfort, he owned more Angora goats than anybody in the world. In 1945, he made the cover of Life magazine and a story in there about him. Well, when he had that lease from the Franklins, and Arthur Eichenloff, Stella's husband, was his ranch foreman, took care of him. And Steeler had places leased everywhere. He had Wilson Ranch, great big ranch leased all around John City, he had all over the country. And one day I was out there, and they could drive right by our garage through the gate and go up to the little place above us called the Hanson's place. He had it leased. But one day there was a car coming up the hill there, so I went out there and opened the gate. And it was Adolph Steeler with Arthur Eichenloff. So Adolph Steeler handed me a dime or a quarter something and thanked me. And boy, after that, I was always looking for when that car ever came. I was going to get out there and open that gate. Yeah, he was. I think Ricky Eichenloff still got one of those Life magazines. That's good. He owned no telling how many thousands and thousands of Angora goats, and he bought them cheap. After the Depression, paid 75 cents a head for them or so, and he shared the mohair off of them for years. And then it put him in business. I heard, I think it might have been a joke, but I heard one time that he went somewhere and bought him a Cadillac. And when he came back to Comfort, he had a billy goat in that Cadillac with him. And they said, Mr. Steeler, what the heck are you doing with that? He said, well, that's what paid for this Cadillac. But that was a story. I'm not sure that's real. We could go through. Probably, Ricky Eichenloff would know, Arthur would have known, but I don't know about Ricky. But Ricky said he still had the magazine. I had a Life magazine.
And we had hoped to interview Stella and Arthur, but that didn't work out.
Yeah, Well, I'll tell you, there's somebody older than I am that lives down here. Is Arvin Weber. He's up in his 80s. And I was there a while back talking to him. I don't think he'd come out here. He walked with a cane. He can't get around too good. But he's just as sharp as he can be. He told me about property here. Ms. Ryan wanted to know who owned this land. I said, well, I remember when the Hales owned it. And the Loves owned this right down here that Ronnie has. And the Hales owned all this on the north side, Ms. Ryan's, and down here what the lawyer Hale has now. That's where the Bailey Hales lived down there. But he owned all this, and as far as I know, he was in the oil business down in Venezuela because Ms. Hale had pictures. Every house were all built on stilts, water, and she had a sawfish blade that hung on the wall here. It had paintings on it. It had teeth on it like a saw, and she had it here in school all the time. And I remember that George Washington picture used to hang right up here somewhere.
How about some family traditions? Did you have some family traditions? Like when you celebrated Christmas, was there anything special about Christmas?
Oh yeah, we always had our own Christmas at our house. And maybe, then I had an aunt lived in San Antonio. They came up quite often and that. But we always just had our own Christmas, And of course, here at school, we'd have a Christmas party. And something else I wanted to tell, I thought of now. We always had a school closing in May, and we'd have a barbecue. That barbecue pit is up here in the ground. And everybody would donate either sheep or a goat or something. And the men would come up here at night and work all night, barbecuing. And then we had a meal that day at lunch. That was our school closing. And we had that every year. And also, during that time, there were twin-engine planes flying out of San Marcos. They were, I guess, bomber pilots training in these twin-engine planes. They were flying all the time. They were, I guess, it was Gary Air Force, Gary. But, so one time, they had one of them missing. And they flew forever around here. So finally, they spotted it from the air, and it was back up here on the Pets place, right at the other side of the divide as you go down, going towards the liquor box. And they found it up there on the side of a hill where it had crashed and burned. But I don't know how many days it was. They were all killed except this one guy was thrown out, and he had a broken leg. And I don't know, he kind of made him a crutch out of something. And he found a goat trail down to a spring to water. And he got down to it and drank water, and he wanted to know if those little bugs on top, he'd catch those little bugs and eat them, you know, because he didn't have anything. I don't know how many days he was there, but during this school closing, somehow he made it up to the road. And that morning, some car came by, and of course he was, you know, he looked awful rough, I'm sure. And he said he heard a car coming, so he kind of rolled out in the road. And when a car came, it just went around him and took off real fast. Well, he made it all the way down the hill, across the divide, down to the Everett house, which is right at the foot of the divide, on the left, what's on the right now, it used to be on the left. And he crawled down to that house, and one of the Everett daughters, older, her husband was over in the army somewhere, and he crawled up there, and she gave him some water. I think she gave him a little milk. But that evening after we went home, I was going to feed the hogs across the road, and I went across the road with a bucket of feed. And here come Mr. Everett, this old pickup, and this woolly guy with him, and rough look. I thought, what the heck is that he got in there? Well, he took him down to the hospital here at Blanco, and they said they picked a teacup full of ticks off of him. And that man made it.
He survived.
And I don't know how many days he was out here. It was in May, you know, but he found the water. If he hadn't found that water, I'm sure he'd died. So then the next day Sunday here came all the troops and everybody, and local people went up there and started looking, and they found it. I don't know if there was 2 or 3 in the plane or what, maybe just 2, but it just hit the side of the hill and burned. But somehow it threw him out. Of course, he had a broken leg, but how he made it. And he was from somewhere up in Illinois, and after that, every Christmas night, he would send a gift to the Everetts.
Yeah.
But I always thought that was really something.
Well, that's a good Christmas story.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
I think one other question about, Linda was asking me about Christmas traditions. At home, did you have candles on your tree?
Yeah, we had candles. And they had little holders they went in, and you lit them. And they could start a fire pretty easy. And then we went to my grandmother's, Opa Canop, Frederick Opa Canop. At Christmas, they always had a big tree, and we usually go up there, you know. And
What kind of Christmas presents did you get?
well, the best thing I ever got when I was little, I got a little caterpillar with rubber tracks on it, with lugs on it. And you could wind it up, and it'd go, and you could stack books up, and it'd go up there, and it'd go to the top. And that was the best gift I ever had. I played with that thing for years, but it had no batteries, it didn't wind up, you know. I'll tell you one of the most, something that just happened here in January, this surprise birthday party I got. That was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, I think. There were over 200 people signed up the guest book, and some of them didn't sign it. But all my old friends, the goat, Richard and goat business, Perry had got from the association, had got the names of all the registered breeders. And boy, there was a bunch of them showed up from Brownwood, Sonora, Bandera, Pipe Creek, Harper, let's see, down Odell, from down at Driftwood, and there were people from everywhere that came. And when I walked in, I saw all these guys sitting at a table with black hats on, and I knew that's who they were. They were all over Edges. And
Well, when did you get in the Angora goat business?
okay, when I got out of the Army, and I went up in the Army in 57, 58. When I got out of the Army, my dad always had commercial goats, you know, and I always liked them. And of course, we had sheep, and we had those registered shorthorn cattle. And Mr. Bernard Fox over at Cypress Mill was an old Angora breeder, registered breeder. And I decided, well, his cousin had a Blanco locker plant, Hugo Fox. And I said something to him one day, and he said, you know something? Why don't I go buy you some goats, and then you run them on shares, you know? And so we started, and after a few years, I bought them from him, where they all was mine. So that's when I started going to the goat sales. I had those registered goats. I finally started, they used to have about 3 or 4 Angora, registered Angora sales. The biggest one was at Rock Springs, Texas Angora goat raisers. And there was a hill country sale at Junction. And then we had little ones. We had at Fredericksburg for a while, there at Parker. But in those days, Angora goats were really popular. See, there was a government incentive on the mohair that you'd sell the mohair, and what to make up the difference, I think it was about $4 a pound on mohair. And you got government incentive to make up the difference, so you could make money off of them. And then I started going to the sales, and let's see, in 1988, I had the highest selling goat at the Tagger sale at Rock Springs. I got $5,200 for one of my billies, and I got $2,600 for another one the same year. I think they placed 9ths and 10ths, but the 9th place goat brought more money than any goat in the sale. And the following year, I had one that way down the line didn't even place, and he bought $4,400. But it was a couple from Canada. They were partners with somebody from Great Britain, from England, that bought this goat for $4,400. And they had taken to Canada and had to quarantine him so long before he could go to Great Britain, England. And that was a good days then, boy, I tell you, it was. But I've still got the registered Angoras, and people have got rid of them. Everybody's got Boer goats and meat goats, Spanish goats. There's still some breeders. Last year at Tagger sale they got a Junction now, used to be in Rock Springs. I had the top selling goat. Now the difference in price brought $950. A couple of years ago, we got an experiment station at San Angelo that I had 2 billies sold for $950, one for $750, and they were the top. $950, that was the top selling goats. So even though I don't do much, my daughter and Hazel do they're kidding my goats for me now. I think I've 33 babies. So I always liked the Angora goats, and they were good to me there for years.
Well, you mostly raised them to sell.
Well,
you didn't
I raised the sires, a bit of the other people that registered breeders, and in the commercial breeders, they don't mind paying for them because they use these sires on their goats to improve them, you know, and that's what they went by. And but no, nowadays it's getting, there's down to only 2 sales now. The one at Sonora Experiment Station, where they put them on test, and then they give you a computer to give you everything about them. If they've got any defects, they don't get in.
So they really test them.
Oh, they really. If you go through there, they have to be a pretty good goat. But we took some out there just in the end of February. A friend of mine, Larry Dyke, he's got the Stonewall Body Shop. He lives in Fredericksburg, but he's got a ranch north of Fredericksburg, about 15 miles. So he and I are about the only 2 down this area that are still raising Angora. And I don't know how long it'll be, but the mohair got real cheap here. After they dropped that incentive off of there, the mohair got real cheap. They couldn't hardly sell it. And it stacked up in the warehouses for several years. And then finally, when they started selling it again, I think they started selling like for $1 a pound. And a lot of that went to China, the Chinese one. Most all our mohair always went to Great Britain or Italy or somewhere, you know. There wasn't much of it used over here.
Did you ever have any that went through any warehouses here in Blanco?
I took mohair down there years ago. But later on, I started taking it to Kuebel, and now I've been taking it to Sonora. And I have my mohair graded. It used to be, years ago, the real old, greasy, heavy type goats, everybody wanted them. They shared more pounds. But then they got to where they started grading the hair, and you could have an adult goat, nanny, that could even share, they were finer, they wouldn't share the pounds, but it was great kid hair. And kid hair is so much higher than the adult hair is. Well, let's see, the last spring, the second sharing kid hair brought $7.50 a pound, and the adult brought around $3 a pound. And now, but it went down after this break here. See, the buyers, a lot of buyers are from Great Britain and different for the buy. And a lot of it goes to South Africa. They raise Angors in South Africa too. That's about their, and actually they have their big sales, and usually what their sales that determines our market over here.
Okay.
But it's still going on.
So the difference was that we used to use it here in the United States?
Well, a lot of Angors, but most of the old Angors they didn't have any hair on their neck, down on their legs. They just, you know, but Mr. Steele, I'm sure he had a lot of those kinds.
Okay.
And they used them for brush control too, especially muttons, to take your billy kids and castrate them and make muttons out of them. And they just put them out in big pastures with brush, because they love brush. If you got, especially the Chinook brush, this low brush. The goats do better on it than anything.
Do they eat a lot of grass?
They eat grass too, but they prefer brush and browse. That's why they're a good combination with cattle, sheep, and goats. The cattle will eat the tall grass, the sheep will eat the short grass, and the goats will eat the brush and grass too. But that's why there's always a good combination in this area.
I guess I'm going to have to get me some sheep then. I need to cut some grass.
Boy, sheep will take it down low. They'll eat low. Like now, boy, I tell you, the way the country is now, where you have sheep, it's grazed down.
Have you ever gone through anything like the drought we're having now?
The what?
The drought that we have now.
This is as bad as it's ever been. In the 50s, like I said, I got out of school in 51. I guess it was 54, 55. I went to work, Cage Brothers, road work, because, you know, there was drought. Mother and Dad were on the place, and he ended up selling most of the stock, you know, during the drought. And, but then later on it went to rain again, and then of course after I got out of service, we moved on. My wife and I, one child, and my dad and mother moved to Blanco household. And then Daddy sold the place to Stanley Williamson, I guess in about 1960. But after Jimmy Stewart had it, there were several that owned it.
Right.
There was the Scroggins that owned it, and I think someone else, and then Stanley Williamson lived at Iowa Park, but he bought it then.
Well, I'm going to have to wrap up this interview. I got the 1 minute warning here, and I just wanted to know, is there anything else that you can tell us that you think we ought to know about?
I don't know. Every now and then I'll think of something, but that's
I think you have done a great interview here, and I've learned a lot. I really have from you today. I think that's great.
Yeah,
And we thank you very much for
I guess that's about it. I'll probably think of something later on. But
well,
right at this time. Pictures up there is, of course, when I was a little boy. And the next picture there has got one of the only pictures my dad on it, I think, was some of the family and maybe an ad or so. The next picture has a ribbon with one of the champion goats I had. Then one was a calf. I showed the club calf, I guess when I was about 8, 9, or 10 years old. Then over there, that picture at the waterfall.